The great being saith, O ye children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race, and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men. Suffer it not to become a source of dissension and discord, of hate and enmity. This is the straight path, the fixed and immovable foundation. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair its strength, nor will the revolution of countless centuries undermine its structure. Our hope is that the world's religious leaders and the rulers thereof will unitedly arise for the reformation of this age and the rehabilitation of its fortunes. Let them, after meditating on its needs, take counsel together, and through anxious and full deliberation, administer to a diseased and sorely afflicted world the remedy it requireth. Were man to appreciate the greatness of his station and the loftiness of his destiny, he would manifest naught save goodly character, pure deeds, and a seemly and praiseworthy conduct. Baha'u'llah. So today we're really happy to have Mr. Alan Smith as our speaker, and his topic is The Earth is One Country and Mankind its Citizens. Born in Manistee, Michigan in 1947, Alan Smith has dedicated his life to both public service and the advancement of the Bahá'í Faith. He received his undergraduate degree at Michigan State University, a law degree from the University of Michigan, and studied labor relations at Cornell University. In 1976, he and his family relocated to St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands, where he served as Chief Public Defender of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Assistant Attorney General, and later as Chief Labor Counsel. In 1987, he was appointed Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. Thereafter, he was a trial lawyer for nearly 2 decades before serving as a magistrate judge of the Superior Court. Beyond his legal career, he's contributed to community life through service on the legal services of the Virgin Islands Board, the Martin Luther King Day Planning Committee, and the Virgin Islands Advisory Committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. A Baha'i since the early 1970s, he served as a member of local and national spiritual assemblies in the Virgin Islands and the Continental Board of Counsellors for the Americas from 1985 to 1995. He and his wife make their home on St. John, Virgin Islands. His son, daughter-in-law, and 3 grandchildren reside on the U.S. mainland. He continues to support efforts to strengthen Baha'i community life and share perspectives shaped by nearly 50 years of service at the intersection of law, justice, and spiritual principle. So with that, I'm so happy to hand it off to Mr. Smith.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's a privilege to be able to share some thoughts and have a conversation about an issue that may be lurking in the minds of many of our sisters and brothers around the world. I also want to thank the Farhani family for providing this space where we can come together and share thoughts and ideas and advance the movement of the revelation of Baha'u'llah throughout the world. I see a face over in the right-hand corner of my screen, and the name says James J. Keene. And I'm really wondering whether or not that's the same James J. Keene that I knew when I first became a Baha'i almost 50 years ago. He is. What a blessing. What a bounty. You never know what we'll find in these spaces. The world that we live in today is fractioned. It's becoming even more fragmented. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the Baha'i Faith, I just want to share a brief introduction and to some of the central figures of the faith, and I may also reference an aspect of the planning for the expansion of the Baha'i Faith. The Baha'i Faith is the youngest independent world religion. Began in the mid-19th century in Iran, and it teaches the oneness of God, the oneness of humanity, and the oneness of religions. There are three central figures of the Baha'i Faith. The Bab, who was the herald of the faith, who prepared the way for him who God shall make manifest. And he lived from 1819 to 1850. And Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, to whom the Bab referred, and whose teachings opened the way for the Baha'i Faith to evolve through the teachings of Baha'u'llah. And as I mentioned at the outset, he proclaimed humanity as one family, and the earth is but one country, and mankind is citizens. That is the line from which my comments today will evolve. Also, his son, Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, who was appointed the successor to Baha'u'llah, and the perfect example of how a Baha'i should lead his or her life. Abdul Baha traveled in the West in 1912 and 1913, bringing this message of the oneness of humanity and the oneness of mankind. And I'd also like to mention the grandson of Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, who served as the guardian of the Baha'i Faith and is responsible for much of the interpretive and aspects of moving the faith's language from Arabic and Persian into English, and then leading the faith, a profound thinker in and of his own right, and trained by his grandfather for this work. And today, the Baha'i Faith is headed by the international governing body known as the Universal House of Justice, which is elected every 5 years by representatives of Baha'i communities throughout the entire world. And it provides guidance to the global Baha'i community and addresses humanity's evolving needs. The age in which we live is fully captured and encompassed by this profound statement of Baha'u'llah: the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. Nonetheless, there are people in the world who want us to return, it appears, to the days of absolute national sovereignty, like unto those of the 19th century. That age in which Baha'u'llah lived, and that age in which he foresaw an age of unity, in which he brought teachings that will support and bring to being that age of unity. Baha'u'llah used the metaphor, in my view, to describe the relationship we have with our brothers and sisters with whom we share the earth. He stated that all humanity was created from the same dust, from one same substance, and he admonished that we be even as one soul. He also likens humanity to a single tree. Quote, "Ye are the leaves of one tree, the fruits of one branch." And in these powerful metaphors, he suggests more than spiritual unity. These metaphors point to an intrinsic shared origin of every human being. In his revelation, division by nation, race, or class is revealed as illusion. What is real, what is fundamental, is our oneness in being. While these ideas may sound somewhat poetic, I want to suggest that they are both practical and urgent. These words describe the way the world works today. Just as Baha'u'llah has obliterated the idea of human beings, that human beings can be separated or segregated by race, the concept of absolute national sovereignty, the idea that each country can act as if it were entirely independent and that its national interest is superior to that of every other nation is not only outdated, but it contradicts reality. And that's what I want to talk about in a very practical, pragmatic way. The reality of the world today and why it is clear that the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. Primarily because when something contradicts reality, what do we call it? Many of us, or most of us, might say, well, that's superstition. So today I would like to suggest that the idea that we are living in the 19th century when countries can operate with impunity within and without their own boundaries is pure superstition. It contradicts the reality of today's world. So what we'd like to do today is walk through 5 areas of life where reality shows us beyond any doubt that no nation can truly stand alone. I've picked 5 areas: economics, the environment, global health, communication, and science. Along the way, I'll do my best to connect these realities to a Baha'i perspective that has long pointed humanity toward unity. Let's address first the Baha'i vision of the economic reality, today's global economic reality. The Baha'i vision of a global economic organization is for the good of all. And in practice, we already live in a single economic system. International trade now accounts for 60% of the world's gross domestic product. That means almost 2/3 of all the economic activity on Earth depends on exchanges across borders. Think about your smartphone. Its glass may come from one country, the chip from another, the software written across 3 continents, the assembly done elsewhere. Even something as basic as bread may involve wheat, fertilizers, fuel, and machinery from multiple nations. Or consider the sheer scale of daily global connections. Every day, more than 100,000 international flights take off and land, carrying millions of people across borders. Billions of emails and text messages cross national boundaries in seconds. Trillions of dollars move through international financial systems linking markets across continents. And countless phone calls, personal, professional, and governmental, remind us that communication itself no longer stops at a boundary. These ordinary daily exchanges reveal the reality. Humanity is already living in one interconnected community. The reality that no country is economically self-sufficient cannot be debated. If a major supply chain breaks in one place, shocks are felt everywhere. Absolute sovereignty in economics simply does not exist anymore. Stability, however, requires cooperation, shared rules, and fair systems. Moving on to the environment. Baha'u'llah described humanity as the trustees of the earth, responsible for caring for it together. And nature makes this truth obvious. Carbon dioxide from a single factory in one country warms the atmosphere for everyone. Microplastics released into the Pacific Ocean wash up in the Arctic. Smoke from wildfires in North America drifts across the Atlantic. No government can protect its own air or defend its own climate. The environment is a shared system. That means solutions must be global. Agreements like the Paris Climate Accord are not luxuries, they are necessities. Without collective enforcement and mutual responsibility, the planet itself becomes unlivable. Absolute sovereignty fails utterly when it comes to the national world. Let's look at the other area, one of the other areas I chose, global health. The Baha'i writings speak of collective security. The welfare of one part of humanity is inseparable from the welfare of the whole. We can think way back to Ebola, but we can think more recently to COVID-19. And this oneness is painfully clear. In just 90 days, the virus reached 185 countries. No wall, no border, no declaration of sovereignty could stop it. By contrast, smallpox eradication, one of humanity's greatest achievements, succeeded only because nearly every nation cooperated, sharing vaccines, data, and expertise. Health sovereignty is an illusion. In the age of airplanes and dense urban networks, disease anywhere can quickly become disease everywhere. Protecting life requires transparent cooperation, trust in science, and joint action across borders. Moving on to communication. Some of you may know, and some of you may not, that the Baha'i writings foresaw the invention of what one might call the annihilation of distance. That is a system of instantaneous international communication that crossed borders. Significantly, that in 1844, when the Bab announced his declaration, Mr. Morris also sent his first telegraph. What hath God wrought? Today, 5.4 billion people are online. The world's population is 8.2 billion. That means 2 out of every 3 people on Earth is connected via the internet. An invention that is well within the lifetime of everyone in this space today. A protest in one city can be seen by millions across the globe within hours. A song, a story, or even misfortune can travel faster than any government can contain it. This means information sovereignty is gone. What happens within one nation instantly becomes part of a global conversation. The challenge we now face is not how to keep information within borders, but how to cooperate in building standards for truth, privacy, cybersecurity, and the responsibility for sharing of ideas. I've even looked at, scientific unity in space. The International Space Station is the product of 15 partner nations. The Human Genome Project included scientists across 6 continents. Climate satellites freely share data worldwide. The great breakthroughs of our age in medicine, in space, in climate, and science emerge not from isolation, but from collaboration. Scientific isolationism wastes time and resources. The problems we face are too complex for any one country to solve. And perhaps nothing symbolizes this better than the blue marble photograph, which you all can imagine, which everyone in this space has seen, and I'm not going to project it, of one planet, one home, without borders visible. Today's world might be more accurately described as one in which nations possess what the international relations experts call nominal independence. That is, they retain symbols and formal structures of sovereignty, flags, anthems, constitutions, the presumed authority to wage war and occupy seats in the United Nations, etc. Yet their practical freedom of action is constrained by global realities. Economic independence, interdependence, international law, environmental agreements, trade regimes, security alliances, and digital communications means that no state can act in isolation. Thus, while national sovereignty exists in name and appearance, the actual condition of nations is one of deep interdependence, making nominal independence a truer description. So, we're looking at a concrete reality about what the world is. In fact, the Baha'i Faith and the Baha'i writings suggest that, not even suggest, Baha'u'llah was absolutely clear about this, that national sovereignty has come to an end. Shoghi Effendi, in the middle of the 20th century, wrote and explained that nation building has come to an end. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax, and that humanity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relationships, and establish once for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of its life. In the Baha'i view, sovereignty itself belongs to God. From him is derived their sovereignty. And the rulers of nations are called upon to unite, acknowledge that the welfare of humanity requires cooperation, not isolation. These passages affirm that the concept of unchecked national sovereignty is obsolete in an age of global interdependence. Yet, nations continue to behave as if we are still in the 19th century. But as demonstrated in the beginning of my remarks, it is evident that across at least these 5 domains, economy, environment, health, communication, and science, the pattern of interdependence is unmistakable. Absolute sovereignty is obsolete. This notion no longer serves humanity. The Baha'i teachings envision not a single world government, but erases national sovereignty, but rather a world commonwealth. Nations retain autonomy in local matters while yielding certain powers to global authority to protect the common good. Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah both put it beautifully. Let not a man glory in that he loves his country. Let him rather glory in this, that he loves his kind. It was not a statement by Abdu'l-Baha, but quoted from Abdu'l-Baha. Baha'u'llah made that statement. These realities show us that the world really functions as one system. The Baha'i writings remind us that this is not an accident of history. It is part of what the Baha'i teachings clearly say of a divine process of humanity's collective maturation. Every one of us is a potential protagonist in this age of transformation. We can no longer be passive observers, no longer waiting for governments or institutions alone. But we must be active participants in building unity at every level of society. In the last half of the 19th century, Baha'u'llah said, "My object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its peoples. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Absolute sovereignty belongs to the past. Humanity's survival depends on embracing our shared responsibility, politically, economically, and spiritually. The Baha'i framework for action invites everyone to contribute. We are all potential protagonists, agents of change. Whether by fostering friendship across cultures, nurturing young people, building capacity in our neighborhoods, or advancing justice and truth in our professions. Every act counts. Every voice matters. Every person has a part to play in this age of transformation. So, I leave you with the following questions. In your own life, what is one area where you would like to see greater cooperation? And what are you doing to increase that cooperation? The earth is one country. We are its citizens. Let us recognize our spiritual and material oneness and focus on building those relationships individually and collectively that will make unity a reality, one conscious choice at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have some time for a Q&A now. So if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat. Could you please speak more on world common law versus having a world government?
A world commonwealth?
Common law.
Well, maybe my voice didn't come through clearly. I used the word commonwealth. And from my understanding, that refers to a system of federated states, similar to the way that the United States is organized. Within the boundaries of each state, there is a nominal sovereignty, if you will, right? A sovereignty that is limited by certain conditions, and certain other rights are given to the central state, to the United States itself. For instance, states do not have the right to wage war. So similarly, in a federated world, individual states would not have the right to wage war, but they would have the right to maintain police forces for internal purposes.
Lived experience is so diverse. How is that useful for building unity?
Now that's a wonderful question. A really, really wonderful question. And it relates to something that I was reflecting on early this morning. That Baha'u'llah tells us that we have the capacity to see God through every atom in existence, to know God through every atom in existence. And because these atoms come together and organize themselves in this vast array of diversity in all that we see in the created and material world, that diversity in and of itself is an expression of the oneness of reality. That's my view. So that, and in my view, I like to think of it as a diamond, right? A diamond, when in the hands of a true artist and someone who really knows how to work with diamonds, can have multiple facets, and each facet reflects the light in a slightly different way. You see it cast a slightly different vision to the eye. But it's still one diamond. And what the jeweler wants to do is he doesn't want to crack the diamond, he doesn't want to fracture the diamond, but what he wants to do is to allow that wholeness to be reflected from all these diverse angles. So, in my way of thinking, this is how the unity and diversity is made manifest. And so in each human being, we find each human being being a soul. That soul is a unique reflection of this unknowable essence, this creative reality. It is manifest in this human body in physical form and moves through this world, but in reality, it is a reflection of the Creator that has a unique capacity, like unto that of each facet of a diamond.
With the present turmoil, chaos, and wars in different parts of the world, are there any signs of moving towards the lesser peace?
This is, in my opinion, it's all moving us toward the lesser peace. And the signs can be discerned in this space itself. The signs can be discerned in the space I was in last night, where it was an online fireside with 4 or 5 young people. One in the US military who had embraced the faith, who saw the reality of oneness. We can drop down any number of places in the world in local communities where we see people coming together to solve local issues without regard to their partisanship, without regard to their clan, without regard to their gender. Why? Because they see a need that locally needs to be solved, and they begin solving it locally with their own resources through a process of consultation, a free and open exchange, no one wanting to win, but all desirous of solving the problem. This is going on all over the world. The media tends to focus our attention on the fractioning that's going on, the disruption that's going on. Yet in that disruption, spaces are opened for people to say, we own this reality on the ground in our village, in our town. And by coming together in unity, we can begin to address that problem. We may not be able to completely resolve it, but we can begin to address it together. So I think we have to shift our focus from what the media tells us is really going on in the world or is going on in the world to what is really going on in the world in these spaces that are being opened because current existing institutions are no longer really capable of meeting the needs of people on the ground. This is my view on that.
What is your understanding of country borders based on the writings and principles?
What is my understanding of country borders? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Borders?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, a wonderful question. I don't know if there's anything that speaks directly about that, except to the extent that the writings say that in the future Commonwealth, each country will have clearly defined borders. And that each country will have, each sovereign within that country or each government within that country will have certain authority with respect to what happens within those borders in the sense of the relationships between and among members of the body politic. How those borders will be defined, I don't know. My own personal speculation is Baha'u'llah addresses the peoples and kindreds of the earth. And as we know, for instance, let's take Africa. It's the most classic example. We know that the borders in Africa had nothing to do with the peoples and kindreds. All right, it had to do with the European powers' decision as to how they were going to divide it up. Yet the peoples and kindreds, if they had been left to choose, may have chosen different boundaries that related to their relationships to each other, their unique cultural distinctions, all part of one whole, yet able to reflect and show in the world and be proud of and take glory in that which is uniquely theirs. Again, as an aspect of the diamond.
There is fear among people with the concept of world order or world federation. How do you respond to this?
With a question. Why do you fear it? That would be my question to the person. What is it that you fear? Is it that you fear someone will take something away from you that you have an inherent right to? Do you fear that this world government will somehow oppress or suppress or tyrannize you? If so, what aspect of your culture or your, quote, rights will be tyrannized, will be usurped, will be taken away? If you look at the United States as a model, which is a pretty decent model, and if you look at also certain European states, which are pretty decent models as to how the uniqueness of geographic regions are maintained and certain levels of governance are maintained within them, yet there is a whole where they operate cooperatively and cede or give up certain of their privileges, if you will. But their basic human rights are guaranteed. And if it's a fear of losing human rights, well, then what are those human rights that you're afraid you're going to lose? And from the Baha'i perspective, no country will be left out of participation, full participation in the governance of the global commonwealth. Every country will have a right to be at the table. Every country will have the right to democratically elect those who serve there. And the function of that body will be not the welfare of any one country, but the welfare of all humanity.
How do we balance loyalty to our own country or culture with the idea of belonging to one human family?
Wonderful question. How do you balance you with being a member of your family? If we take the family as the basic unit of human society, regardless of how you define family, and then you project that up a hierarchy to the level of the nation, or the level of, say, the village, the level of the town, the level of the city, the nation, the world, right? There are certain relationships, and it's those relationships allow for stability. And when the relationships become unstable, the individual relationships, then the whole unit becomes unstable. So when the relationship between mother and father becomes unstable, the family unit becomes unstable. When the relationship between mother and son is destabilized, the whole family is destabilized. And that, from my limited understanding and thinking about it, that can be extrapolated all the way up, you will, of the hierarchy of how we govern ourselves as the body politic. We are the ones who make the choices. If we choose to exercise that choice, if we choose to believe that we are endowed inherently with the capacity to know of our own knowledge, to seek justice. And by justice is meant to find that balance that allows us to see with our own eyes and not through the eyes of someone else. And these are things that we have to train our young people, our children to do. Children are capable of doing that. We have to see them as having that capacity and begin a process of training them in that. And this is part of the global Baha'i expansion effort, part of the global Baha'i plan for building vibrant communities around the world, communities that are havens of safety and security at the local level.
Do you think that the UN has failed to do its duty? And if so, why?
The UN is made up of nation states. Would you agree? If it's made up of nation states, and if it's made up of a certain hierarchy that limited the participation of nation states at the highest level, in a world that is so highly integrated today, it becomes even more difficult to function. However, the United Nations did do what it had the capacity to do since the end of World War II. It prevented global catastrophe. Within the structure that the leaders of the world at that time came together to establish. One may say that the Security Council today is an impediment to the effective functioning of the United Nations. Why? Because it limits the participation of those who can help to make the critical decisions about the welfare of humanity, particularly when it comes to the use of arms in conflicts. And then that undercuts the ability and capacity of the rest of humanity to have a voice in the process. However, it did its job for a period of time. Now it's time to begin to think as to an institution that has even that increases the capacity of everyone to really be at the table effectively and meaningfully. You know, it also relates, it also makes me think about progressive revelation, which is a concept in the faith, right? So one could ask, did Christianity fail? No, Christianity didn't fail. It did what God wanted it to do for a period of time. It taught humanity to God's first law, to love one another. Islam did the same thing. It brought together these diverse, divergent, conflicting tribes and brought them under the umbrella of the oneness of God and the oneness of humanity. So all institutions, even the institutions, even the divine institution, the ancient and eternal thing that we call religion, is always uniquely adapted to the capacity and needs of the age, and the capacity of mankind to comprehend. We're now at that stage of transition. We're now moving out of adolescence into adulthood. Our capacity to comprehend must necessarily be expanded. So it is in spaces like this where we can have these kinds of exchanges that we learn more about this process. And then when we move these kinds of conversations into our local communities, that's where the rubber begins to hit the road in very phenomenal ways that we haven't as yet begun to fully appreciate or realize. But if we look for it, we'll find it.
When will we see significant change towards world peace?
God knows. I don't. And again, you put in a word significant. What is significant toward world peace? For me, the youngster who I spent time with a day and a half ago, tutoring him, a youngster who was unnoticed, insignificant, kind of the kid who everybody ignores. In my view, that was a contribution to world peace because God alone knows the capacity of that youngster. God alone knows what that youngster will contribute to the world. So my act is as significant of any act, in my view, of any leader anywhere on earth. That's what my role is. My role is to be of servant. And, Jesus Christ himself, he said, even though you have done this unto the least of them, you have done this unto me. And I think when we begin to think in those terms, that it's the least of those who need to be served. And it's the least of those once their capacity is allowed to manifest itself in the world, will bring about the change. Why? Because ultimately, it is the people who support leadership, who, there's a statement, you get the leadership you deserved. Well, if you're behaving in ways that are inconsistent with the love of your fellow human being, you get leadership that is inconsistent with that. But if at your local level, you're behaving in ways that are building community, bringing hearts together, bringing people together across diverse elements of your community, those people then get the leadership deserve, which is leadership that supports harmony, that supports cooperation, that advances the well-being of all. We've been compelled to think that it's top down. No, in my view, reality is really bottom up. Because when my cells rebel against me, then my body begins as a whole to become less and less capable, less and less competent, less and less able to move me through this world. Baha'u'llah uses that beautiful analogy of the body, in my view, for a powerful reason, because it works. If you think it through, if you stay with it long enough, and you don't dismiss it as some sort of beautiful poetry, but as a practical reality, it then becomes manifest in thought, word, and deed.
Do you think the UN is a model for a world government? And if so, how should its members be elected?
Well, as I said before, the United Nations has done a phenomenal job in preventing global catastrophe. As with all institutions, with all human things, with all created things, they must necessarily transform. And that transformation, some might call death. But I'd rather call it transformation. It moves to a new state, a new condition. And whether or not that institution that supplants, if you will, the United Nations is called the same thing, its functions, in my view, will be the well-being of humanity, with full participation of all of humanity. And of course, the teachings of the Bahá'í Faith are that its structure is a model, a pattern that the world can follow. And it can follow it with confidence as revealed by Baha'u'llah, that it will lead us to the kingdom of God on earth.
Thank you. I think that looks like all of our questions. So thank you so much again, Mr. Smith. We really appreciate your talk and your time today.
Well, again, thank you all for participating. And again, thank you to the Bahá'í family for providing this space.
Thank you. So our speaker next week will be Mr. Mohibat Ahdieh, and his talk will be Baha'u'llah and One Common Faith, Eternal in the Past, Eternal in the Future.